Mel Brooks made his career making people laugh, but not all of it was easy. At 98 years old, he's telling his secrets, and what he says isn't just about jokes. It's about Dom DeLuise starting to laugh before they even started filming. Gene Hackman. Treating a silly scene like it was a serious play, and Madeline Kahn wanting to change the script right in the middle of filming while wearing her costume. It's Richard Pryor writing amazing jokes, but never getting to act in the movie. It's Cloris Leachman saying no to every suggestion, and Anne Bancroft, the woman he loved, looking him right in the eye and saying, "Are you serious?" These were famous actors, and they almost drove him crazy. Dom DeLuise, the man who laughed way too much. Mel Brooks knew how to handle crazy situations. He built his whole career on it, but nothing got him ready for the craziness of working with Dom DeLuise. They worked together on many movies. Silent Movie, History of the World Part 1, Spaceballs, and Robin Hood, Men in Tights. But behind all the laughter, Mel was slowly going crazy. Dom's problem wasn't that he was stuck up. It wasn't that he was lazy. It wasn't even that he disagreed about the movie. It was laughter, his own. Dom couldn't stay serious for more than a few seconds without starting to laugh, sometimes before they even started filming. Mel once said it was like trying to direct a kid who couldn't stop giggling. You'd say action, and Dom would already be gasping for air, covering his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. Mel wasn't lying when he said they had to film the same scene 5, 10, 15 times, just target one good take. The worst time, or maybe the most unforgettable, happened during History of the World Part 1. Dom had Jew's tone line to say, just one. But Madeline Kahn, who was always causing trouble, raised an eyebrow from across the room. Dom lost it. He fell down. He laughed for 45 minutes, while everyone stood around, waiting, completely tired out. Mel never forgot that day. He never got over it either, but he also never stopped hiring Dom, because once you got past Thelator, once Dom finally got through a take, it was amazing. His timing was natural. His presence drew you in. He wasn't really acting so much as just being himself in a world made entirely from funny moments. Mel understood that. That's why even after promising he'd never do it again, he always brought Dom back. When they weren't filming, their friendship was just a scratch. Dom would show up too. The movie set with homemade pasta, feed everyone, tell stories, make jokes. He was impossible to control, but impossible not to love. Mel, who loved having everything planned and timed perfectly, could never understand how someone so messy could be so perfect on camera. He was annoyed by that, but respected it even more. Years later, looking back at his career, Mel didn't fess it when asked who drove him the most crazy on set. Dom, he said. I hated working with him, and I miss him every day. It wasn't hate like we usually think of it. It was frustration that came from caring deeply, a kind of creative pain that only happens when you love someone too much to fire them. Dom ruined scenes, but he saved the movies. Madeline Kahn, the smart woman who questioned every. If Dom DeLuise was the funny guy who couldn't keep a straight face, then Madeline Kahn was like a storm, pretending to be calm. From Blazing Saddles to Young Frankenstein, High Anxiety, and History of the World Part 1. She was the heart of Mel's most loved films. But yet, she was the one who most often made him wonder if he was even the boss. Madeline didn't just act. She took everything apart. She came to the movie set not to follow directions, but to challenge them. She picked apart lines, questioned where to stand, argued about camera angles. If something didn't feel right to her, she said so. If she thought a line wasn't good enough for her character, she demanded they change it. No tasked, demanded. Mel, who was used to being in charge of the chaos, suddenly found himself surrounded by it, with Madeline holding the lighter. She was often late. Mel would be ready, everyone waiting, lights burning hot, and Madeline would walk in calm and not worried. Never saying sorry, just a peaceful smile, as if time moved around her. It drove him crazy. But then the camera started rolling. Ange was perfect. Take Blazing Saddles. Her performance as Lily von Stuppis, still famous today. The voice, the eyes, the perfect timing. But behind every one of those moments was a bunch of arguments and rewrites. She wanted to practice it differently. She wanted to change the punchline. She questioned the decorations on set. Mel wanted to move fast. Madeline wanted to get it right. During Young Frankenstein, it got worse. Her part as Elizabeth required her to act vain and overly dramatic, two things Shek knew well. But Madeline didn't just play for laughs. She wanted to understand her character better. She asked Mel questions he wasn't ready to answer. She argued about the psychology of every tiny facial expression. The result was some of the most unforgettable comedy of the 1970s, but Mel said he left the set every day completely exhausted. He once said working with her was like wrestling a cat in a thunderstorm. But yet he kept going back, because deep down he knew she made his work better. She was hard to please, but her instincts were sharp. She didn't trust anyone's vision more than her own. And for Mel, that was maddening, but it was also what made her great. He said she questioned everything. She made me feel like I didn't know what I was doing. And half the time, she was right. Gene Hackman. One scene, lots of tension. Mel Brooks. Didn't often work with actors like Gene Hackman. Serious, trained, Oscar-winning. A man who came from through of the French Connection and The Conversation. Not the world of fart jokes and silly horses. But in 1974, during the making of Young Frankenstein, Gene asked to be in the film, not through agents or studios, but directly through his friend, Gene Wilder. Hackman had seen Wilder's early scenes and was interested. He wanted to try comedy, even Neve, just once. Mel was shocked. What was Gene Hackman doing in a Mel Brooks comedy? But how could he say no? Their salt was one unforgettable scene. Hackman played the blind hermit woofers soup and cigars to Frankenstein's mints. On paper, it was short, silly, a throwaway gag. But Hackman treated like Shakespeare. He memorized every beat. He wanted rehearsal time. He wanted discussions about why his character acted that way. Meanwhile, the rest of the cast was making things up, laughing, changing lines while filming. Mel, who lived off that energy, suddenly had to change gears. The set slowed down. The air changed. Hackman's performance was perfect, but getting there wasn't easy. Mel remembered how Hackman stood quietly when others broke her actor. Not amused, just patient in a way that made everyone feel like they were wasting time. Every ruined take on a look, not angry, but firm. A look that said, some of us came to work. Mel later said, directing Gene Hackman was like trying to play jazz with someone who brought a metronome. It was intention in the explosive sense. No yelling, no tantrums. Just two professionals with completely different approaches trying to meet in the middle. They never worked together again. Not because they were mad, but because they understood it wasn't a good fit. Mel needed actors who did well in disorder. Hackman needed Applin, a script that didn't change every her. Still, Mel never forgot the Gene. The way Hackman poured himself a ridiculous role and made it sing. He said, we were different animals. But that day, in that scene, it worked. Cloris Leachman, the woman who refused to obey. Cloris Leachman wasn't rebellious in the loud way. She didn't scream, didn't storm off set, but she had her own kind of defiance. quiet, never-ending, and impossible to ignore. Mel Brooks called her one of the most talented actors he ever directed. He also said she gave him more head of chest than almost anyone else. Their first major time working together was Young Frankenstein, where she played Frau Blucher, the housekeeper whose very name made horses scream. The role was weird, strange, and unforgettable. But behind the scenes, Cloris pushed it back on almost everything. Mel would give direction, and Cloris would stare at him silently. Then she'd ask why. Not with attitude, just with real conviction. She needed to believe it. If she didn't, she wouldn't do it. Mel said working with her felt like trying to drive a Ferrari with no brakes. She was fast, powerful, and full of intensity, but she didn't like being steered. She'd question line readings. She'd suggest routes, and sometimes she'd ignore the notes altogether and do it her own way. Annoying, yes. But the takes often turned out better. During High Anxiety, where she played the cold, terrifying Nurse Diesel, the same thing happened. Mel pictured the character as exaggerated and unhinged. Cloris brought subtle menace. Calculate in Grecian. It wasn't what he asked for, but it worked. She drained him. Mel said that after a full day of filming with Cloris, he needed a nap just to recover. But she never phoned it in. Shoes, never lazy. She came prepared, passionate, and unwilling to settle for good enough. She was exhausting, Mel admitted, but she made me better. And for Mel Brooks, that was the highest end of compliment. Richard Pryor, the genius who never made it on screen. Richard Pryor never appeared in Blazing Saddles, not in the credits as an actor, not on the screen as the sheriff. Booth's spirit is burned into every frame. The biting humor, the fearless commentary on race, the boldness that made the film both hilarious and deeply uncomfortable. That was Pryor. Mel Brooks didn't just want him for the movie. He wrote the role of Bart for him. In early 1973, when Mel was developing the script, he already had Richard's voice in his head. At that time, Pryor was becoming a comedy force, a truth-teller who used wit against the hypocrisy of American culture. He had just started hitting mainstream fame with raw stand-up albums like Craps After Hours, and he wasn't like anyone else. That Fearon knew this is the man who can walk into a racist frontier town with a badge, a grin, and a middle finger tooth system and make it funny. But Warner Brothers didn't see what Mel saw. Tatham Pryor wasn't a visionary. He was malleability. His reputation for being erratic, often missing gigs, dealing with drug use, and burning bridges. Medethi's studio nervous. They feared he wouldn't show up, or worse, that he'd show up high. Pryor had already been banned from multiple talk shows, and the scandal from his infamous Las Vegas meltdown in 1971 was still fresh in Hollywood memory. Mel fought for him anyway. Hebe gave the studio to reconsider. He knew that no one else could give that character of Bart the same raw on and stay in danger. But the answer was final. No Pryor, no risk. Find someone safer. Mel was heartbroken. So was Richard. But instead of walking away, Pryor did something unexpected. He stayed. Mel brought him into the writing room. And Pryor became an uncredited co-writer on film. It wasn't a consolation prize. It was creative fire. The writing sessions became legendary. Mel assembled a team that included Andrew Bergman, Norman Steinberg, and Alan Euger. But it was Richard who set the tone. He pushed C jokes further, challenged everyone's comfort zone, and brought a level of racial commentary that had never been seen in mainstream comedy. The infomercial, where Bart holds a gun to his own head and says, "Nobody move," or then word. Gets it. That was pure Pryor. Dark, daring, and somehow funny. But working with him wasn't easy. Mel described it as waiting for lightning. Richard might come in ready. Explosive, brilliant, throwing out jokes that Mediever Yon double over, or he might not show up at all. He was battling guction, insecurity, and pressure from every side. One day, he'd write 5 pages of genius. The next, he'd vanish for 3. Still, Mel kept him close. He knew that without Richard's voice, Blazing Saddles would lose its bite. That character of Bart may have been played by Clavin Little, a talented actor in his own right, but the soul of Bart was Richard Pryor. Years later, Mel admitted the regret never fully left him. I still wonder what that movie would have been Freechart had starred. He said, "We lost something not having him on camera, but we kept his fire in the script. He gave him lightning, and I just tried to catch it." In a bittersweet twist, Blazing Saddles went on to become a cultural millstone. But the man who helped make it revolutionary remained just out of frame. Pryor would go on to star in his own films. Silver Streak, Stir Crazy, The Toy, but none carried the same kind-of satire he forged with Mel in that writing room. Anne Bancroft, the one who knew him too well. With Anne Bancroft, there was no pretending, no director charm, no creative bluff. She was Mel Brooks's wife and the only actor who truly knew when he was full of it. That made her the hardest person he ever worked with. They had been married 4 decades when they decided to co-star in To Be or Not to Be, 1983, a remake of the 1942 classic set in Nazi-occupied Poland. Mel produced and acted. Anu took the lead female role. It should have been simple, familiar territory, but nothing about working with Anne Wassenpaul. On set, she didn't treat him like Mel Brooks, the director. She treated him like Mel, the man who forgot to take out the garbage, the man sheared with overburnt toast. She questioned everything. If a line didn't ring true, she said so. If his direction felt vague, she called him on it right there in front of everyone. Mel joked Theo, no studio executive had ever made him sweat the way Anne did, with one eyebrow raise and the word, "really." They fought, not with shouting, but with intellect, with precision, with deep mutual respect. She didn't back down, and neither did he. But every argument, too, to something better. Anne brought elegance, gravity, and raw clarity to every scene. Mel admitted she could break him with a sentence, but that same sentence often saved the scene. Set, they were affectionate, funny, married, but on set it was a battlefield, one built on love and truth. Mel once said, "She didn't let me off the hook, no tense, that's why. I loved her and why directing her nearly killed me. She was the toughest actor he ever worked with, and the one he trusted the most." So who shocked you the most? Awisa, Richard Pryor. Never getting the rolier Anne Bancroft, never letting her husband win. Drop your answer below. Like the video, hit subscribe, and remember, if Mel Brooks ever said he hated working with you, it probably meant you were brilliant. Asterisk.